Welcome to Lawyers Who Care, the video show podcast that highlights attorneys who go above and beyond on behalf of their clients. And on each episode, we will meet a new lawyer and they will share stories about when they went beyond that legal counsel for the benefit of their client. My name is Andrew Samalin, principal of Samalin Wealth, a nationally recognized wealth management firm for lawyers, law firms, and their clients. And let's applaud lawyers who care and learn from them. Today, my guest is Nicole Grunfeld. She is a partner and attorney with Katz Melinger, PLLC in New York City, focusing on all aspects of employment law. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me here.
So, Nicole, tell us about what brought you to the law.
Well, what brought me to the law? I've actually always been interested in the law. I am the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and one of the things, amongst all the other horrors involved in that period, obviously one of the things that always sort of caught my attention was the fact that much of what happened was legal, that laws had been implemented in a certain way to repress. And so I've always had an interest in how laws and the machinery of the state can be used to uplift or to oppress. And I also like to argue, so law school seemed like an obvious choice for me. And I always knew that I would want to do something in the civil rights area. I was also raised to believe very much that people who have a voice or who have access should use it to help those who don't. So that is what brought me to law school and the area of civil rights. I originally actually thought that I wanted to do advocacy and more sort of political work, but in trying that on, what I realized is that although that work is very, very important, for my case, it was a little dry, and I wanted client contact, which also allowed me to use my more empathetic side to connect with clients who were at a tough spot in their lives. So in law school, I took a civil rights clinic, and in one of my summer jobs, I worked in employment law litigation on plaintiff side, and I really enjoyed it. So that is a long story about how I got to where I am.
And what about employment law? What had you focus on that niche?
So employment is just such an integral part of so many people's lives. Obviously many people depend on it for their livelihoods, and a great number of people also turn to it for a sense of self. And especially in the United States, there's a great imbalance in power between employers and employees. And it seemed to me that it was an area where employees and workers could really use an advocate, and it was an area where I could make a difference.
Gotcha. So when we first started, chatting earlier today, you had mentioned you had a story that you wanted to share with everyone. Do you want to tell us that now?
Sure. So obviously, people who come to our firm are often in distress. They have had some trouble at their jobs. Either they feel they've been discriminated against, or they have been underpaid, or they should have gotten a reasonable accommodation for disability and didn't. So I have lots of stories, but one that sticks out in my mind, one particular case was a young woman, and part of what sticks out in my mind is she was young. This was her first job, and she was just very distraught about how to handle it. She came to us. She was a personal assistant for the owner of a very small company, and she worked directly for the owner. And the owner, her boss, had asked her out a few times, and this made her very, very uncomfortable. And because it was so small, and because he was the owner, there was no HR department. There was no one else she could address it with, and there was also no way for her to be transferred to a different position. So she came to us to seek advice on what she could do. And she also, she wasn't sure if she had legal claims because she had sort of tentatively raised the issue with her boss that the asking her out had made her uncomfortable, and he had sort of brushed it off and said, that he had done it quote unquote respectfully, that he hadn't. He said, that he hadn't conditioned her job on it, and that she should essentially get over it. So, we listened, and obviously we're very, very empathetic. That was a hard situation for her to be in. What also came out in conversation with her was that she also incidentally had overtime claims. She had been paid incorrectly, that she had been classified as someone who was not entitled to overtime based on the fact that she was earning a salary, but the mere fact of earning a salary is not enough to exempt you from overtime. There are other requirements. And this wasn't what she called us to focus on, and it's not what we wanted to focus on. However, those types of cases are a lot more straightforward and can act as good leverage when negotiating with an employer. So we spoke with her quite a bit, and she was very clear that she wanted to leave the job, that there wasn't any way that she could continue to work there because there wasn't anyone else there that she could work for, and she didn't feel comfortable working for the employer directly. She didn't feel comfortable being alone with him. So we attempted to negotiate first without initiating suit, and the employer more or less stuck to his guns in the sense of that he didn't believe he had harassed her. He didn't believe he discriminated against her. Again, he used the words, that he had been respectful, that he hadn't pressured her, so to speak, in his mind, and was resistant to the idea that the mere power differential was a form of pressure, and he was dismissive of the fact that she was uncomfortable with him. So eventually we did file suit, and we were referred automatically to mediation, which happens in the Southern District of New York. And at mediation, she was able to tell her story with the help of me and with the help of the mediator. And I don't know how much the employer actually heard what she was saying, but she felt heard. She felt that she had gotten her point across. And again, the fact that there were unpaid overtime claims, which are less, they're more objective. They're more difficult for an employer to fight against, and that was additional leverage in order to get her some additional severance and money so that she could leave that job and go on and find another job where she would be more comfortable. And one of the things that we worked on that was important to her, that she hadn't thought about in the beginning, but as we discussed it, it became important to her, was a non-monetary term, which is also something that we consider in our line of work. Obviously our clients would like to be financially compensated, but sometimes there are non-monetary issues. And in this case, it was her first job out of college, and she was worried about, she'd worked there for a fair amount of time before these developments arose, and she was worried about having a reference for her next job. Normally, when we negotiate these matters, what we implement is what's called a neutral reference, which is that the employer will, if asked by a potential future employer, will only give the dates of employment and the title that the former employee held. But in this case, that wouldn't be really good enough because it was such a small company, it would raise perhaps red flags if she weren't able to get a good reference to get her next job. So we were able to negotiate more or less a script of a good reference, and that was what was used when potential employers contacted her former employer, and she went on to find another job, and she got some money from her former employer, which tided her over in the meantime with a nice cushion, I might add, and she was satisfied with the result and felt like she had been heard, and her situation had been her feelings about the situation had been validated.
Got it. And so that's the focus of your practice. By the way, let me just make sure everyone knows today my guest is Nicole Grunfeld. She is a partner and an attorney with Katz Melinger, PLLC in New York City. Nicole, so that people can get in touch with you, can you share your phone number twice?
Sure. It's 212-460-0047. That's 212-460-0047. We also have a website, which is katzmelinger.com. I always tell people Melinger only has one L. People like to put two L's in there. And we are on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter.
Got it. So everyone knows this has been the Lawyers Who Care video show podcast that highlights attorneys that go above and beyond, and Nicole is a shining example of that. If you're an attorney or know one that might be appropriate for this, please have them reach out to us at success@samalinwealth.com. That's success@samalinwealth. Again, my very special guest is Nicole Grunfeld. Nicole, thank you so much for having us today, or thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Great.